They always say churches are safe, holy, protected. But when the janitor looked me in the eye and asked why I was letting someone stand behind me while I played, my hands went cold on the keys. I was 17 when it happened, and I still can't hear a church piano without thinking about that night. My high school required volunteer hours, and I'd been helping out at St. Aurelia's for months. Mostly mundane stuff, straightening hymnals, setting up folding chairs, wiping candle wax off the floor. Sister Agnes said I was one of the good ones, and eventually asked if I'd consider helping with music during early Sunday service. I wasn't great at piano, but I could read music and follow tempo well enough. She told me I could use the sanctuary any time to practice, so long as I let the staff know. It was late November, already dark by 5 p.m. That night, I came in around 7:30, planning to practice for an hour. The sanctuary was massive, echoey, and eerily silent once the lights dimmed. The only sound was the clacking of my shoes and the occasional creak of the old wooden pews settling. I signed in on the clipboard in the office, nodded at Thomas, the overnight janitor, and headed straight to the piano. He gave me a little wave without even looking up from his mop bucket. Now, this piano was right up near the altar, facing away from the pews and choir loft. There was something kind of haunting about sitting there, surrounded by rows of empty seats and stained glass saints watching from the dark. Still, I found it peaceful in a weird way, sacred, like nothing bad could happen here. I started warming up, playing through the Sunday set list. Be Not Afraid, Panis Angelicus, the usual. The keys echoed cleanly through the space. I got so wrapped up in the music that I didn't notice the temperature dropping until I saw my own breath, which was strange. The church always stayed a bit chilly, but never that cold. That's when I noticed it, the sensation, like someone was behind me. I didn't hear anything, not exactly, but I felt that strange pressure, like when someone stands too close in a crowd. The hairs on my neck lifted. I paused. Silence. I turned around. Nothing but empty pews stretching back into darkness. I shook it off. Maybe Thomas was walking through behind me. Maybe I'd imagined it. I went back to playing, this time focusing harder. 15 minutes later, I saw him. Thomas, the janitor, walking slowly down the side aisle, mopping. When he got close to the front, he paused and gave me a puzzled look. Then he said it, casually, like asking about a misplaced jacket. Hey, just so you know, the woman behind you isn't supposed to be up there. I stopped playing mid-chord. I turned to look, fast. There was no one. No one's there, I said, already feeling the tremble in my voice. Thomas tilted his head like he was confused now. She was standing right behind you, long black hair. Looked like she was watching you play. I figured it was one of the nuns. I stood up so fast the bench screeched against the floor. There's no one, I repeated. He looked toward the altar, then back at me. She's not there now, he muttered, frowning. Weird. I don't know why, but I didn't leave right then. I didn't want to seem scared, and I told myself maybe he was tired or maybe he'd seen a reflection in the glass. I made a joke about ghosts and forced a laugh. Thomas didn't laugh. He just said, "You should finish up soon." He walked off without another word. I played for maybe 5 more minutes, rushing through the final hymn just to get it done. Every key felt heavy. Every echo bounced back like a warning. I kept glancing over my shoulder, too scared to fully turn my back. As I packed my things, I heard something from the choir loft. A click, like someone stepping softly across the wooden balcony. I froze. Waited. Another click. A creak. I stepped into the aisle and looked up. The loft was dark. I could just barely make out the railing, silhouetted against the stained glass. No movement, no sound. I told myself it was the building settling, like old places do. I walked out fast, leaving the clipboard unsigned. That night I barely slept. The next morning I came back early before school to grab the sheet music I'd left behind. Sister Agnes was in the office. I asked her if any of the nuns had been in the sanctuary the night before. She blinked, confused. "No, dear, it was just you and Thomas." I asked if there were any visitors. She said the doors stay locked after 6. No one comes in or out without her knowing. I almost didn't say it, but I asked if she'd ever seen a woman with long black hair around the sanctuary. Not a nun. Her expression changed. She looked toward the chapel, then back at me. She said quietly, "There was a woman like that. A long time ago. She used to sing in the choir before I came here. Died in a car accident in the 90s. She paused. Some folks say they still hear her voice in the loft. I never practiced alone after that. Even now, years later, whenever I pass an old church, I think of that icy breath and the way Thomas looked at me, so sure someone had been standing there. I never told him what Sister Agnes said, and I still wonder if he hadn't spoken, would I have ever turned around at all? They told me the church was the safest place during the storm, but the thing that kept knocking on the confession booth door that night wasn't looking for forgiveness. It happened during one of the worst blizzards we'd had in years. I was 19, driving back from a friend's place 2 towns over when the snow picked up out of nowhere. Within minutes, the road disappeared under a sheet of white. My phone buzzed with an emergency alert shelter in place, blizzard conditions, travel prohibited. I pulled off the main road into the only place with its lights still on, St. Bastian's Catholic Church. I wasn't religious, not really. My grandma used to drag me there when I was a kid, but it always gave me the creeps. Something about the stillness, the dim lighting, the way the statues looked down like they knew something you didn't. But that night, I was grateful for the warmth. I parked, staggered through the snow, and banged on the side door. A priest, Father Jerome, answered. He was older, soft-spoken, a bit stiff. Said they'd already helped a few other stranded travelers earlier in the evening. And though most had moved on to the local high school shelter, I was welcome to stay the night. They didn't have extra rooms, but there were blankets in the basement. "It stays warm down there," he said, "and quiet." He led me down a narrow staircase, flipping on the lights as we descended. The basement was plain stone walls, a few storage closets, an old confessional booth tucked into one corner, and some folding chairs stacked along the far side. It smelled like mildew and incense, but he wasn't wrong. It was warm, claustrophobic, but better than freezing in my car. He handed me a few blankets and a flashlight in case the power flickered. I thanked him. As he turned to go, he paused near the top of the stairs. "If you hear anything strange, just ignore it," he said without looking at me. Old churches settle in odd ways. That should have been my first clue. I laid the blankets out near a corner farthest from the confessional booth and tried to get comfortable. The storm raged outside. I could hear the wind howling through the vents and tree branches tapping against the upper windows. I scrolled my phone, but service was spotty and eventually it died. I drifted off around midnight. Then the knocking started. At first, I thought it was the storm, a branch hitting something, but it was rhythmic, 3 knocks, then silence. I sat up, straining to hear tap, tap, tap. It was coming from inside the basement. I flicked on the flashlight and aimed it around the room. Nothing moved. The confessional booth sat silently across from me, dark and shut. Another knock. 3 times I stood slowly. Hello? I called out. My voice came out weird, small, shaky. Silence. I walked toward the stairs. Maybe Father Jerome was checking in. But when I opened the door to the stairwell, it was pitch black and utterly silent. The storm outside was muffled here. The only sound was my own breath. I turned back toward the booth. Something about it felt off. The air near it seemed colder, thicker. I took a step forward. Another knock sharp this time. It came from inside the booth, my body locked up. I stood frozen, flashlight beam jittering in my shaking hand. Tap, tap, tap. I should have left. I should have run upstairs and demanded an explanation, but instead, like an idiot, I moved closer. I crouched near the door and whispered, "Is someone in there?" No reply. I gripped the door handle and hesitated. Every instinct screamed not to open it. Instead, I knocked back. 3 times, silence. Then from inside a voice, barely above a whisper. Ragged, male. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." I backed up fast. I didn't respond. I didn't want to respond. "Father," the voice asked again. I didn't mean to. She was already dead. I bolted. I ran upstairs 2 steps at a time, slammed into the sanctuary, and found Father Jerome near the altar lighting candles. He looked surprised and concerned when he saw my face. I told him someone was in the booth, that they were knocking, talking, confessing. His expression changed slowly. First disbelief, then something darker. "There's no one down there," he said. "I heard someone," I insisted. "They were whispering they knew I was there." He hesitated, then put a hand on my shoulder. "You're not the first to hear things," he said quietly. "That confessional's been sealed for 20 years. A man once came here to confess a murder, then disappeared before anyone could speak to him. The booth's been closed ever since." He paused. "Sometimes people say he still wants to confess." I left before sunrise. The roads were barely cleared, but I couldn't stay. I never went back to that church. Never checked if the story was real. I don't want to know. But sometimes on nights when the wind howls loud enough, I swear I can still hear it. Tap, tap. The church emptied out after rehearsal. The doors were locked, and I was alone. But someone or something kept singing from the choir loft. It happened 3 years ago, during my junior year of college. I joined the church choir mostly for community service hours and a free meal on Sundays. I wasn't super religious, but St. Helena's was a beautiful old church near campus Gothic arches, creaky wooden pews, candlelit chapels, and stained glass windows that glowed like fire when the sun hit them just right. Rehearsals were on Wednesday nights, and that particular night we ran a little late. Our director, Ms. Reiner, was strict but kind. She wanted the Easter performance to be perfect. By the time we wrapped, it was close to 9:30. People packed up fast, grabbing coats and sheet music, exchanging a few tired laughs. I remember we sang Ave Verum Corpus as our final run-through, and the way the harmonies floated in that vast stone chamber gave me chills. I volunteered to stay behind and help stack chairs and collect leftover programs. Ms. Reiner tossed me the keys to the side door and reminded me to lock up when I left. One by one, the others filed out, their voices echoing through the entryway. I was alone in the sanctuary in less than 10 minutes. I didn't mind. It was peaceful when it was quiet, almost sacred in a way that made you want to move slower, breathe softer. But then the singing started again. At first, I thought I was imagining it. A single voice, faint and distant, humming the very piece we'd just practiced. Avenue, Verum Corpus. I froze mid-step and turned toward the choir loft. The lights were off up there, just a faint spill of moonlight through the stained glass. I waited. The voice continued. Clear, pitch perfect. A woman's voice, I called out. Hello? No answer. Just the next line whispered almost lovingly. ... Na tum de Maria Virgin. The hairs on my arms stood straight up. I took a cautious step toward the loft stairs, half expecting to see one of the altos who had forgotten something, maybe singing to herself while grabbing her phone or water bottle. But as I climbed the first few steps, the voice stopped. I stood there in silence, heart thumping. Is someone up there? I asked again, louder this time. Nothing. I walked up the rest of the stairs, flashlight on my phone in hand. The loft was empty. I walked the length of it, checking behind the risers, under the robe rack, even in the corner where the hymn books were stacked. No one. I stood still for a moment, listening. Silence. I exhaled, told myself it was just my brain replaying the song, or maybe the echo bouncing in weird ways. The place was built in the 1800s. Old stone could do strange things with sound, right? I went back downstairs, still a little shaken, and gathered my things quickly. Just as I turned to leave, the organ, the massive pipe organ, let out a low hum. Just a single chord, deep, cold. I didn't even think. I ran to the side door, fumbled the keys, and got out into the freezing night air as fast as I could. I didn't lock up. I left it swinging. The next day I came back with Ms. Reiner and another choir member. I told them what happened, trying to laugh it off like I'd just gotten spooked. Ms. Reiner looked pale. She told me that years ago, before I ever joined. One of the former sopranos, Elizabeth, had a heart attack in the choir loft during rehearsal. She died before paramedics arrived. The song they were rehearsing at the time? Ave Verum Corpus. She said some of the older members still avoided the loft at night. That some swore they heard her voice finishing pieces they hadn't completed during practice. That she was a perfectionist who never missed a single performance. I never volunteered to lock up again, and I've never heard that hymn the same way since. Now, when the notes start, I don't hear just music. I listen for the extra voice, the one that doesn't belong, but always finds a way back into the harmony. The voice that doesn't want to be forgotten.